Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Luffy is trained by Kaido, and got Harem, movie 3. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I do not own this fanfic, and also make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, Doublem7, and support him for writing this awesome fanfic. Link is in the description. Let's begin this story. The Kuja pirates caught a good breeze, pushing them past the pursuing Big Mom pirates. In due time, they would leave them in the dust. Her gaze was deadly, but to the eyes of others, it was seductive. Come with me. She expressed her anger, yet Luffy was not worried. Everyone on the deck was at edge. The Amazon warriors were ready to fire at their empress's command. Meanwhile, the members of the Strowat Grand Armada were ready for a fight. It's alright guys, me and the pirate empress have business to attend to. Just don't engage. Boa Hancock continued to look down on Luffy, as she pointed her finger at him. Her head was thrown all the way back, as this was her way of looking down on someone. It was very cute really, too bad he never noticed her before. Mugiwara, follow me. She then summoned her trusty python, who carried her to a private captain quarters aboard the Kuja pirate ship. Luffy shrugged his shoulders, and followed her, looking at Katakuri, his eyes saying for them to stand down. The newest addition to the pirate group raised his hands, to which his crew member relaxed. Little by little, the hierarchy was starting to form within the Strowat Grand Armada. Mihawk released his grip on his blade, Arlong put his fist down, while ensuring that Burly was shielded right behind him. Katakuri looked at the two, and made a mental note of whatever the hell was going on there. Though the Strowats lowered their weapons, the Kuja pirates continued to threaten them with their bow. Going to the captain's quarter was the easy part, as Hancock continued to stare him down. She then opened the door, and had him go in first. Luffy compiled again. In his mind he was getting his story straight. She then slammed the door behind her. Memories of her previous life flashed before her eyes, as the shameful tattoo was brought up by this damn pirate. Their eyes met, as Luffy found himself mesmerized in her eyes, burning with loathsome feeling against men. And then a vision passed through him. In a similar way that Queen Atohem gave him a vision into her life by a handshake, Hancock gave him a vision via eye contact. He stood before her, as her celestial dragon whipped her repeatedly for attempting to get a piece of bread. Her young frail body could barely bear the beating. Though she did not cry, he could feel her resolve, as she wanted to reserve her fluids. Crying would waste what little water she had in her body. Then, as the beating finally ended, and the celestial dragons finally left her alone, Hancock lay on the ground for a moment before finally spitting the piece of bread in which she took a beating. She then placed it in one of her tiny pockets, as she slowly made her way back to the sleeping quarter. Luffy followed her, and threw her slow limb towards where she needed to go. He could feel what she was feeling. It was anger, confusion, disbelief, sorrow, but she was not one without hope that she clinged onto. Then, as she reached where she sleeps when the celestial dragons weren't having their fun with her, she took out the small piece of bread, and split it in three. What little piece she stole, and took a beating for, she split. For underneath the hay in which she slept on were two of the girls. Luffy could recognize them, as Sandersonia with the green hair, and Marigold with the golden locks. What happened to you? Asked Marigold. Tears began to well from her eyes. Please don't cry, reserve your strength, and eat. Hancock shakily handed them a piece of her bread, what little she had taken what her body suffered for. No Hancock, you eat it, replied Sandersonia, trying to give her back the piece of bread. Please, you both have to eat. The raven-haired girl pushed the bread back in Sandersonia's mouth, to which she finally ate it. What little was given to her was greatly appreciated. We will survive, I swear. Slaves. Time for a show. Someone screamed from a distance. People who were living no better than livestock began to flock out, as they were the property of the Celestial Dragon, and the show was the process in which the Celestial Dragon picks a slave, and does whatever the hell they want to do, whatever it was. Marigold and Sandersonia trembled at the thought of what their day would look like. But Hancock held them close, hugging them both. We will all get through this, she stated firmly, though her body trembled from her weakness. It did not help that her body continued to flare up from eating a devil fruit for the pleasure of the Celestial Dragons. They did whatever they wanted, and they force-fed the sisters one devil fruit each, making them show animals. That's how they were treated. As the sisters made their way to the pit, where the show takes place, Luffy could see a hideous-looking celestial dragon, a product of many years of inner family procreation. The celestial dragon made his way to Hancock, taking an interest in her. He then caressed her cheeks before smacking her on the side of her head. Why? No reason. They didn't need a reason to believe the slaves were property of the celestial dragon. He then dragged her to a red room, decorated with the finest that the world could offer. This was where the celestial dragons had their way with whoever they wanted. He proceeded to toss her in bed, and then slowly caressed her beautiful skin. Stupid slave, he whispered before ripping her clothes from her body. Hancock did not flinch, as this was something that occurred often. She did not give them the satisfaction of showing fear. Luffy could only look on, as Hancock was going to be raped. Her body was going to be used without consent. His fist was clenched tightly, and his face turned bright pink, as all he wanted to do was beat the life out of the celestial dragon. Boom. Something miraculous happened. An explosion occurred in the distance, causing the celestial dragon to momentarily jump away from Hancock. Revolution. exclaimed someone from the outside. The celestial dragon opened the door to have a look and found the pit on fire. What the hell is going on? Exclaimed the celestial dragon. Hancock laid in bed, not daring to move so that she did not get disciplined. No need to elaborate on what they do to those who do not obey. Sir, for your safety, please come with me. We are under attack. This caused Hancock to sit up. Under attack. The celestial dragon followed the guard, suddenly screaming in panic. Hancock grabbed a cloth from the bed, wrapping her naked body. She slowly made her way outside the red room where she found flames everywhere. Then suddenly from the roof of the red room, a guard of the celestial dragon fell, and on his chest was a dagger. He had been stabbed by a tall powerful fisherman. Now, exclaimed the fisherman. He then ran to another guard who was electrocuting a slave on the ground. The fisherman tackled the guard and threw him against the wall. Hancock still couldn't understand what was going on, really, but she ran, found her sisters, and they all ran. Luffy could only watch in horror at everything that was going on. This was the day that Fisher Tiger climbed up the red line and released the slaves held by the celestial dragons. Though he did not do everything himself, he could see his familiar face assisting Fisher Tiger. It was his father, Monkey D. Dragon. Along with other members of the Revolutionary Army, the group managed to help the slaves escape that day. Then the vision ended, and Luffy was back in the room with Hancock. What do you know of my back tattoo, Nijiwar? Hancock exclaimed, as no time seemed to pass from the vision and the present time. After seeing her vision, he understood her disdain, her disbelief, and her anger. If he could finally see Hancock as more than just a pirate empress, she was a human tormented by oppressors in the past, burdened by her position as the strongest woman in her country. I know that you are a strong person for what you went through. He stood up, then took one step forward, causing Hancock to flinch slightly. There was a good distance between them, but Luffy was trying to calm her suspicions. Those who wronged you are not human, they are worse than trash, and I swear on everything that I will deal with them for what they did to prevent it from ever happening again. Then Luffy took another step. And another. You don't know me. Why do you act as if you know what I went through? You are merely a stupid man. All of you are scum in the face of this earth. Hancock prepared her ability, as if the Strowat person gets any closer, she will turn him into stone. You ask what I know about your back tattoo. I know it's a mark of the celestial dragons. Another step, and now he was only a few steps from getting close to her. How her heart dropped at the mention of those demonic beings. Listen, it does not make you less of a human being for what they did to you, in fact it makes you better than them. Those monsters will eventually get what they deserve, and I will be the man to make sure of it. Luffy was finally face to face with her. Luffy stood about a head above her, both were now the same age. In his past life she had been taller than him, but her smaller 19-year-old body made Luffy the taller of the duo. Hancock took her hands, and formed a heart, slightly shocked at his closeness. Sorry, but she released her Miro Miro ability. Her heart-shaped energy waves escaped her hands, and phased through Luffy. She expected him to turn to stone, as all men only want one thing, they were lustful creatures, and her ability petrifies those who lust for her, and with her beautiful features, amazing body, and powerful aura, nobody could resist her. But he did. Luffy remained unfazed, not becoming petrified. She then upped her game by removing her top. The silky dress fell smoothly from her body, revealing her ample, and left little for imagination, and again she attempted to turn him to stone, and again nothing. All she could see from his eyes was desire. There was desire, but not the desire she needed from him. For his desire was to comfort her pain. Why is he like this? Not like any other man she met in her life. He then did something completely unexpected. He picked her up from the ground, and slid it back along her body, then he held her shoulders. He froze, but he didn't try anything, not a kiss, not for pleasure, not all he did was pull her in, and hug her. Yes, all he did was hug her, pulling her close to him. His arms were forceful, but gentle, his grip was tight, but relaxing, allowing him to comfort her pain. The pirate Empress Boa Hancock has not cried since the first day of becoming a human slave for the celestial dragon. She never cried since then, it was a sign of weakness. And she was not going to show them her weakness. But here she was, held in the arms of a strange man, who promised to right the wrongs of this world, and suddenly she couldn't help but break down. All the years that she had to stay strong, to become the pinnacle of the strength in her country, to become in order to protect her people, and to destroy any man who attempted to touch her land, all her pent-up emotion was finally released, as tears began to flow from her eyes. It had been years, and letting the tears escape her eyes felt right. It gave her relief, it felt so good. Luffy held her close, his strong presence allowed her to show a moment of weakness. How did he know her so well? It was like they have known each other for years. Did he have this sort of effect on people? He did bait her to pick him up from certain doom from the Big Mom pirates. He also did not turn into stone from her ability. She had to know more about this man who was going to change the world. She knew it, and she wanted to be there with him. Her tears finally ended after a couple of minutes. She then took in his scent for the last time before gently pushing away from his embrace. Do you feel better? Luffy asked. His look of concern was mesmerizing. Another man saw her at her most vulnerable, and yet he treated her like another human being, with feelings, with emotions, with understanding. Maybe there was hope for the men in this world after all. Yeah, thank you. Why do you make me feel this way despite this being the first time we met each other? Hancock asked. Her heart was beating, and her eyes were dilated. Luffy noticed this, and took a big gulp. In any timeline it seems that Hancock will fall in love with him, just for being himself. I noticed that you were carrying a burden, and I thought I'd help you ease up a little bit. Anyways, thank you for getting us from Toto Land. Where are we headed now? He took a seat on the bed, whereas Hancock continued to remain standing, her back against the door. Luffy could tell that her breathing became heavy, as if a primal instinct was taking over her. They just met, but he could tell she was excited for him. She approached him slowly, with each step a swing of her bodacious assets. This was supposed to be just a talk, but he had a way with how he treated her that she wanted him right there, and then. Pirate Empress. Luffy gulped now that she was using her assets. He was starting to see her as more than the Pirate Empress. Now he was seeing her as a woman. She got close and pushed him on his back, her emotional outburst, and his assistance in calming her made her this way. Though before anything else could happen, the door burst open revealing Sandersonia and Marigold. Sister, what has this man done to you? Exclaimed Sandersonia as she morphed into her hybrid form. Although it didn't seem like Luffy was the one subduing Hancock, Luffy was on the bed with Hancock seemingly prowling on top of him. Hancock stood up straight, clearing her throat. She poises herself with her legs noticeably shaking. Was it from excitement? Was it for anticipation? Luffy would find out another time. But for now there was his current predicament. Well, we have negotiated their surrender, and we will take them all to Amazon Lily for interrogations. Take them to the cell. Sandersonia and Marigold looked at each other, but complied. Luffy understood her position. She had to continue to look strong to her people, or else they would not recognize her. So he was brought to the brig of the ship, where the rest of his crew was. They all sat in their individual cells, as they followed their captain's instruction. Do not fight back. He was then put into his own cell, and locked in. The Amazon women finally left the brig, leaving the Straw Hats to themselves. All the members of the pirate crew were wearing sea prism cuffs. Captain, these cells are frail. These cuffs do not bind me. I can rip it with my hands. Arlong was only telling the truth. Maybe the Amazon women were so confident in their ability that they did not secure the cells. Now we're okay. She's bringing us to Amazon Lily. That's where we need to go. Luffy simply sat on his cell, placing his straw hat over his eyes. It was time for a nap. How come, Captain? Broly asked. She just joined the crew along with her brother, but she felt that Luffy was the leader Big Mom could never be. Before drifting into sleep, Luffy had a simple answer. Sabati. And then he fell asleep, a giant snot bubble forming from his nose. Why Sabati? Asked Katakuri. That place seems so pointless, but it's a bustling archipelago full of rookies. We were there a couple of days ago. He said something about meeting a friend. Mihaka traveled the world in search of a worthy opponent, and it was there, only a few days ago. Did he lose a fight against a Marine Admiral, and it wasn't even a fight? How maybe a rematch with those stupid celestial dragons? Asked Arlong, scratching his chin. The whole time they were conversing, Katakuri was just content in listening to them converse. For the day had been a long one. He just left Yonko in the most prominent position in Big Mom's crew, and has now joined a new pirate crew, led by a very powerful yet mysterious captain. This was going to be an adventure indeed. Newspaper. Throughout the world, a newsletter went out, from the one and only Big News Morgan. In this letter, it contained a handful of new wanted posters, and only one story, the most important of them all. Marine Ford Marine HQ. Ah damn it, who is this punk? Recently Admiral Sakazuki, also known as Akainu. He slammed his fist against the table, breaking it in half. His anger was well documented, but nobody has riled him up like this. Fujiwara Monkey D. Luffy, son of the revolutionary responsible for the Holy Land outbreak, Monkey D. Dragon. Also the grandson of marine hero, Monkey D. Explained Kuzan, who sat beside Kizaru. They were recently assigned under the tutelage of the Marine Admiral. They were both being groomed to become the next admirals, with Kuzan being a frontrunner. To his comment, Akainu simply looked at him with disdain. Of course he knew who he was, he just wanted to scream something. This kid was a head case everywhere. Kuzan and Kizaru simply sat in their chairs, as their news commanding officer was thrown into a fit of rage. Admiral Sengoku had recently announced that one of them will become the next admiral to assume his position, but it was up to Admiral Akainu to decide. Newspaper. The first poster was that of Charlotte Broly. She was looking up at someone, a picture which captures her love-struck look. Possibly taken when Arlong was carrying her through the whole Toto Land fiasco. Her face was slightly pink, but her eyes glowed in glee. Underneath her name was her bounty, dead or alive, 60 million. Plus side Toto Land, Mujiwara. Exclaimed Charlotte Linlin as the Straw Hats and the Kuja pirates were able to escape her wrath. She was the most powerful woman in the whole world, and he was outwitted by a damn Straw Hat brat. Plus Katakuri and Broly are now gone, joining the bastard. Mama, we don't need them. Katakuri was always weak, and Broly was even weaker. We are still one of the most powerful crews in the New World. Pear Sparrow was the first son of Charlotte Linlin, and he had been taking a back seat from Katakuri. He would never beat him in a fair fight, even with the help of others, they would still lose. But Pear Sparrow does not fight fair. Big Mom pirates won't remain so dormant for long from the depths of the underground, and the protective narrative of Big News Morgan. They will emerge from their stasis, and become one of the most powerful players in the new world. The Big Mom pirates, due to the activity of Straw Hat Luffy, are going to become more brutal with Pear Sparrow at the helm of the Sweet Commanders, than with the leadership of Katakuri. With Katakuri in the previous timeline, the Big Mom was more logical, and Charlotte Linlin was more manageable with Katakuri's massive influence. But now with the void that he created for going with the Straw Hat Pirates, Pear Sparrow does not care if Big Mom was controlled. He only cares for destruction, chaos, and that's what will happen from here on out. Yelled Big Mom in frustration. Her mighty roar ripped a cloud out of formation, and through sheer display of power. Her children, allies, and whoever was present on the hill that day, realized that Big Mom had been kept dormant by Katakuri, and now she will be unleashed. To those who witnessed her anger, and to those who heard her mighty roar from miles away, they all knew the time had come. The Big Mom pirates are mobilizing. Newspaper. The next poster would be the man holding Broly. His wanted poster would be captured to where his upper body was shown, and only some parts of Broly can be seen. Her nose was the most prominent in the picture, but his long, sharp nose was also quite distracting. The saw, and underneath his name, Dead or Alive. 100 million Biri. Alabasta Kingdom. This will be your new sleeping quarters. The man with the golden hook for a hand led the raven-haired girl. She remained quiet, not uttering a word since the man had saved her from the alley. Did he really value her ability to read poneglyphs? Isn't it supposed to be illegal? Not a talker, are you? He then went to the door, with the raven-haired girl sitting on the bed. If you need anything, my name is Crocodile. Before he left, he gave her a smile. Robin was her reply, to which Crocodile's smile grew even wider. He then closed the door, and left her to herself. All she could do was lay in her bed. The fresh aroma of clean sheets, and a clean room was mesmerizing. She hasn't had this, she had her mother back in O'Hare. Newspaper. Then there was a poster of a man. His bounty would have been frozen if he would have simply joined the Warlord program. His wanted poster was a look into his face. His deadly gaze, perfectly trimmed beard, was captured perfectly by the photographer. Dracula Mehek, Dead or Alive, 300 million Biri. Fishman Island, Ryuga Kingdom. Whitebeard, I advise you to consider it. Shanks sat across from Whitebeard, aboard the famed Moby Dick. The Whitebeard pirates were on the move, starting their quest for Laugh Tale. This is my family, red-haired. I will not abandon my family. He slammed him on the deck of the ship, causing tremors to erupt from around them. Shanks didn't want to anger the old man further, as a sequel could be problematic. Fine, I get it. But I've warned you. He then began to walk away, as he too has an important business to attend to. Shanks eventually walked towards his own ship, leaving the Whitebeard pirates. What did he want to pop? Descending majestically on the deck from the eagle's nest. His wing burned a bright blue and yellow color, transforming into a phoenix. He then reverted to his human form, as he descended beside his captain. Marco the Phoenix, 1st Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates. He told me to watch out for Teach. He said that he was in trouble. Began Whitebeard. But I don't abandon my family. He has been with us since he was an orphan child. It sounded more like he was convincing himself. Suddenly a head popped up from the deck of the ship. His body was covered in red liquid. The mood suddenly became darker. And behind the man was Teach, with a massive smile on his face. Whitebeard's heart dropped. Thatch what? You, Captain, me, and Teach were just cooking some mean pasta. It blew up on my face. Thatch then grabbed Teach, and messed with his hair. This is a good lad here helping me clean it up. Too bad I didn't clean myself up. Though Marco sighed in relief, he also thought for the worst. Deep down inside, he knew that kid wasn't right. And so did Whitebeard. The teacher had heard their initial conversation. He was sharper than he let off. Outside he was laughing with Thatch, but deep down inside he screamed, as his plan was almost ruined by red-haired. He knew he should have done more than scar the scum bastard, but for now they had more pressing matters to attend to. Whitebeard was going to be king. Newspaper. The second to the last bounty revealed the former member of the Big Mom pirates. Charlotte Katakuri's photograph revealed his face without his scarf. Back in his homeland, his family openly mocked the wanted poster. But here he was, with a smile, happy in his own skin. Underneath his name, alive, 600 million. Big Mom wanted to be the one who ended Katakuri's life. Somewhere in the Grand Line. Log 318. Mission report. Target. Mugiwara. Preference. Dead. Status. Incomplete. Casualties. 48. Then the man put down his transponder snail, and sat back down on the ship which he boarded. The flag which was raised high has been burned by the man. He then took out a small blade which he began to sharpen. Who are you? One man managed to survive the slaughter. This man weakly tried to get up, but was unable to do so. The invader stood up, putting away his blade. He then took a deep sigh, and then pulled the man to his feet. Shagun. The invader pierced the heart of the man, instantly killing him. His finger was covered in blood by he wiped it with the clothes of the man he just killed. Log 319. Mission report. Target. Mugiwara. Preference. Dead. Status. Incomplete. Casualties. 49. He then sat down once more polishing his blade. "Thank you so much," exclaimed a woman aboard a rescue boat. "You saved our lives," she yelled, as the rescue boat was drifting away from the ship, though not just any ship, a slaver ship. He sighed once more. It wasn't like he found the slave ship, killed all the slave traders aboard the ship, freed all the people, and gave them a bag of gold to find their way back home. No, he wouldn't do that. He was Sifra Paul's most effective assassin. Rob Lucci the assassin would never do something like that. Newspaper, a story which covered the entire newspaper for that day, had the news face shooting up to the top of the pirate hierarchy. Morgan, reporter, Mugiwara. He is the man that single-handedly defeated a marine vice admiral. He attacked a celestial dragon in Sabati archipelago and escaped from a marine admiral. He is the man who single-handedly entered Yonko's land and escaped alive. His crew is one of the most powerful ever assembled, consisting of Dracul Mihik, Arlong the Saw, and recently defected Charlotte Burleigh, and more importantly, former commander of the Big Mom Pirates, Charlotte Katakuri. If you see him, fear him. For Mugiwara is a storm. Then his wanted poster was his angered look when he destroyed the Sabati archipelago auction house. Then his name was simply Mugiwara, dead or alive. And his bounty, Red Force. Ben. Are we there yet? Shanks was throwing a rubber ball against the wall of his office. He was bored out of his mind. Maybe he should have gone with Luffy. No, Captain, not yet. But look at this. Ben tossed him the daily newspaper and closed the door from behind him. In the hands of Shanks was the newspaper. He went through the newsreel, the wanted poster of each and every member of the Strowats. Damn Luffy, what a crew. Then last was the Monkey D. Luffy. He's done so much already, and Shanks could clearly remember he just saw him 2 weeks ago. And a bounty 1 million, wait, that couldn't be right. The red-haired man looked over the bounty and scoffed at it being so low. But then he looked again. There was a fold on the bottom right of the paper. He opened it and his jaws dropped. More zeros were hiding from the fold of the paper. Monkey D. Luffy's first bounty in this new world was 1 billion. Kuja pirate ship, Mugiwara. Hancock stood in front of Luffy's cell. A week has passed since the escape from Toto Land. The cell was annoying, but it sure beats fighting with Big Mom. "Yes, Pirate Empress," replied Luffy. "Please call me Hancock," she said. Her voice was low, but the cells were close enough to where everyone could hear their conversation. "Okay, then call me Luffy." And he extended his hands outside of the cell, to which Hancock took, and they shook hands. Her hands were soft, and his hands were firm. There was an instant spark in the handshake, but they had to shake it off. She pulled away, holding her hand close to her heart. "Luffy, we are approaching land. I'm sorry for putting you and your crew in a cage. I can't just change our laws overnight. It's fine, it's where we need to go anyway." He smiled at her, causing her heart to melt. They stared into each other's eyes for a moment too long, but were broken out of trance by a loud voice. "Land up ahead," screamed someone from above. "Well, goodbye for now, Luffy." She then began to walk away, but took a quick glance at him one more time, before finally going up to join her crew. "Call me Arlong." Arlong began to mock Hancock's voice, whereas Burleigh joined along. "Please call me Burleigh." And they both burst out laughing. "Shut it, you two." But he had a stupid grin on his face. Katakuri and Mihik were smiling at the exchange. Finally, they arrived, the land of women, Amazon Lily. Amazon Lily. The Strowats were taken from their cells and made their way to the deck of the ship. Then with an entourage of boat-wielding Kuja warriors, the group made their way to the palace. Luffy had been admiring the view once again. The first time he came here, in a similar manner, as Ryuga Kingdom, he just rushed everything. But now he can actually enjoy the country. With the beautiful, century-old tropical paradise, amazing women all around, and the fresh air. This was heavenly. "Captain, do we break out now or what?" A week of bondage didn't really bother any of the Strowats, as they were all patient people. It was just so easy to get out and escape that it was very tempting to do so. "No, Arlong, we're going to do this the diplomatic way." Luffy had been partly looking at the surroundings, but he was also checking on something else. At any chance he could get, he would look ahead. In front of the group were the Gorgon sisters, with the woman who made him feel some type of way. She was Hancock. Looking back, he didn't really see her other than a friend. But remembering her action towards him, he mentally slapped himself for ignoring all the chances he had with her. Oh well, at least now he would be able to make up for lost time. "Diplomatic way, more like you're going to bone her way," responded Arlong, to which the rest of the group snickered. That was all Luffy could respond, as they finally arrived at the castle. Then the women removed their cuffs, and finally, they were free. The Strowats were in the heart of Amazon Lily, where it was all women. The Kujas were looking at them funny, completely ignoring Burleigh, as they did not care for her being a female. It was the men they were interested in. Katakuri was getting the most audience, as Kujas were poking him to understand him. One woman was even bold enough to touch his butt, to which he just looked at her with an intimidating look. Mihik was also getting a crowd, but he did not mind their attention. He didn't care much for it. All he wanted was a good fight to stretch his arms. The fight with Snack was fun, but he needed to train more, to be strong enough to even beat a Marine Admiral. Arlong was liking the attention, but Broly was giving him a dirty look. He was a bit conflicted on whether he should do something with these Kuja women, or if he should suck it up and see what this thing with Broly will bring them. Now Luffy, well, nobody dared look at him or even get close to him. Was it Hancock's doing? It felt pretty good to have caught her attention in this way. She was a pirate empress, one of the most powerful women in all the seas, and she was hot. The Straw Hats were then led inside the hall and into the throne room, where Hancock sat on her seat of power, and her sisters were by her side. Then another elderly figure stood by the group that Luffy was ever so familiar with. Hancock looked at Luffy while she sat on her throne, and for an intense few seconds, their eyes locked. He gave her a smile, and she blushed feverishly. This exchange could not be missed by her sisters by her side. Marigold and Sandersonia looked at Hancock in confusion. Something was going on there. Luffy stood in the middle of the group. Broly and Arlong were to his left, Katakuri and Mihek to his right. Upon inspection, Luffy noticed that Broly was a bit shorter than Arlong. She was a tall woman, maybe a head taller than him. Then to his right, both men were taller than him. Their shoulders were as high as the top of his straw hat. But one thing was certain, in that room that day, the strongest of them all was him. Everyone knew it, his crew, the Kujas, they all knew that if he wanted to, he could wreak havoc on the island. But he won't. He would rather have Amazon Lily as an ally than an enemy. Straw Hats, you have been summoned here today to be put on trial, proclaimed a short elderly woman. Her name was Elder Nine. He remembered her back in his time. She was an interesting character. We, the Kuja people, have prided ourselves of being free of men for centuries, and to offend our fearless empress. This is blasphemy beyond comprehension. For your offense, your punishment will be shared between you along with your crew. We have selected the strongest warriors in our land, and the objective is to obtain their weapons. If you win, we will set you free. If you lose, we will kill you. Elder Nine stated before the crowd erupted in applause. The women of your crew will be excluded because we do not punish women who step foot in our land. Broly sighed, as she did not have to fight. However, if you all lose, then she will also be killed. Then her expression dropped once more, but she remembered how strong her brother was. Their captain was stronger than her brother, so there was no way for them to lose. It was impossible, right? For the battles, the blue man will face our fiercest warrior, Kikyo. The fair-skinned, black-haired seasoned Kuja warrior stepped forward, waving her snake bow to the cheers of the crowd. Luffy recognized her as the woman who led the pack in hunting him down, but that was a different time, and she was just doing her job. Arlong had a smile on his face, not due to the fight, but because they didn't call him a rotten fishman, and were treating him like a human being. Swordsman, you will engage in a battle with one of our most noble warriors, and a third of the Gorgon sisters, Boa Marigold. The orange-haired sister raised her weapon of choice, a mole axe. Her gigantic stature meant her weapon was gigantic in size, as well. Mihek shouldn't have a problem with it. Luffy knew this because he hauls around that stupidly large black blade. Mihek had his arms crossed, not really caring for the match, simple enough just to win. Dogtooth, oh yeah, I know who you are. You will be fighting another one of the Gorgon sisters, Boa Sandersonia. The green-haired woman's choice for a weapon was a battle axe, and similar to her sister, it was huge. But Katakuri was also large in stature, standing a bit taller than the Gorgon women. Luffy took note of how knowledgeable Elder Nine was. Maybe rarely told her about the Charlotte family. Or maybe Katakuri was just that famous in these parts. Nijiwara, your 1 billion bounty will make our land prosper. But alas, our empress has decided to engage you in a battle. Luffy's eyebrows were raised. Wait, 1 billion bounty? How, what the hell is going on? The battle will begin immediately in the arena. Make your way to the fighting pit. The people in the hall began to filter out, leaving the Straw Hats, the Gorgon sisters, and Elder Nine. Of your trial then. The Straw Hats began to move out of the hall, but Elder Nine held her staff in front of Luffy. Everyone, but you. Arlong was going to start kicking ass, but Luffy held his hands up, telling everyone to go. Go on. Reluctantly, the Straw Hats left the hall, with 2 of the 3 Gorgon sisters leaving the room. For the rest of the day, while the Straw Hats had been fighting for their freedom, Luffy and Hancock had been engaged in their own battle. The first battle of that day had been between Arlong and Kikyo. The second battle of the day had been between Mihek and Marigold. The final battle of the day had been between Katakuri and Sandersonia. All the while Luffy was doing his own battle with Hancock. The crowd was pumped up for the entire event, and it transpired like so. The Saw vs Kikyo Kuja Elite Warrior. Arlong and Kikyo made their way to the center of the battle stadium. The Straw Hats were sitting along the viewer section with their hands bound, with the 2 Gorgon sisters looking over the prisoners to ensure they did not escape. The main problem on the crew was currently with the Pirate Empress, so all they really had to worry about was Dogtooth and Hawkeye. Arlong stretched his arms, then twisted his body to release tension on his back. Meanwhile Kikyo removed a strand of hair from her face, her trusty snake bow on her side, her other hand ready to pull an arrow on her back. The first battle will now commence. Any outside interference will result in absolute defeat. Elder Nine stood at the helm of the viewer box, raising both of her arms. Begin. It should have been a fight, should have lasted more than a few minutes. but Arlong took it upon himself to record a win within a few minutes. Within 5 minutes, Arlong had taken Kikyo's weapon without her knowledge. The first minute was a flurry of arrows that he dodged. He didn't want to be impaled by the poison-coated arrows. As she ran out of ammo, Arlong jumped in to close the gap. Then it was the second minute where Kikyo's hand-to-hand skill was noteworthy, but Arlong was trained in the art of fisherman karate. For each strike by Kikyo, Arlong countered by catching her punches before they could connect with him. But her punches were heavy, and each one took a toll on him. But he wouldn't lose here. That would be slightly embarrassing to his new people. "TSK, you're strong," commented Kikyo, as the third minute of their battle approaches. Kikyo attempted to use her snake bow to limit Arlong's movement. The snake reverted to its animal form, and tried to constrict Arlong, but the fisherman broke the binding. He then caught the incoming Kikyo before her feet could connect. He took a firm grip of her feet, as she was in the air, and threw her against the floor. The crowd was immediately silenced, for Kikyo was unable to move any longer. Then to seal the victory, Arlong picked up the snake bow. He raised it above his head to no applause. Only the voice of Burly could be heard cheering, but the rest were silent. At the 5-minute mark of the first battle, Arlong wins, Elder Nine stated dejectedly. With the victory, Arlong would no longer be in shackles, but would watch the battles, as a spectator. Marigold slammed her mole axe on the ground, and yelled, "What the hell? Get loud. For I, Boa Marigold, will be victorious in my battle." She raised her weapon in the air, and the crowd erupted once more. Dracula Hawkeye Mihek vs Boa Marigold. Mihek stood up from his viewer's seat, and was given his weapon. The Kuja woman removed his cuffs, and he finally made his way to the battle area. He swung his sword a couple of times to regain the blood flow in his arm. Meanwhile, Marigold continued to hype the crowd, but her effort would be for naught. As Elder Nine announced the start of the battle, Mihek disappeared from Marigold's peripheral. She panicked for a moment, instinctively bringing her mole axe to protect herself. But it was too late. Before she could even raise her weapon, Mihek had already taken the mole axe off of her hand, without allowing Marigold to move even an inch. The look of shock filled the crowd, as their strongest warriors were defeated so easily by the outsiders. The victor of this battle is Dracula Mihek. Elder Nine sounded dejected. But there was still hope. There was still Boa Sandersonia and Boa Hancock yet to go. But to save face, she thought of something that would prepare her fighter. A brief intermission will now commence for the final battle. The intermission will give Sandersonia some time to come up with a tactic in fighting Dogtooth, but even his tail reaches their isolated country. In 2 hours will be sundown. Maybe the guise of darkness will give Sandersonia an advantage in the battle. Charlotte Dogtooth Katakuri vs Boa Sandersonia. The hour has passed, and still no sign of Hancock or Mugiwara. Katakuri had been patiently sitting beside Burly, as they waited for his battle. Arlong and Mihek were close by, as they were no longer bound by shackles. Arlong sat on the floor beside the bench where Burly was sitting. Mihek stood beside Katakuri with his arms crossed, and his blade hanging over his back. 5 minutes is my time. Arlong stated dejectedly that he took so long in his battle. 5 seconds, replied Mihek, who had beaten her opponent in a matter of seconds. Watch this. Katakuri finally stood up. The shackles were removed from his hands, as the last of the sunlight finally disappeared in the horizon. The final battle will now commence. Warriors, please enter the arena. Katakuri complied, walking to the center of the stone platform. Boa Sandersonia's eyes glowed a certain yellow color, indicating that she had activated her night vision. Katakuri smirked under his scarf, and looked at the snake zone. His eyes were gentle while hers were fierce, and they continued to stare at one another, until Elder Nine called the match. When she did, Sandersonia was standing, then her eyes rolled to the back of her head, and she fell backwards. Though she never made contact with the floor, as her opponent caught her before she fell on her back. Dead silence covered the arena once more before applause could be heard from Arlong and Burly. It was actually quite comical for Burly to try to clap while she was restrained by cuffs. Mihek had a small smile on his face, as Katakuri won up him once again. There wasn't any bad blood, it was just friendly competition. The Strowats have won this round, but we still have our Pirate Empress, who has yet to emerge from her battle with Mugiwara. Elder Nine confidently proclaimed. This caused a round of murmur to commence for the Kuja warriors. For now we rest, as the most important battle of the day is still ongoing. A testament to our Empress's immense power. The Kujas retired to their homes, while the Strowats were led to a separate sleeping quarter far from the capital. Katakuri relinquished Sandersonia to her sister, Marigold, when he was being led away from the arena. Defeating her was satisfactory, but he couldn't help but look at her once more, as her green hair, yellow eyes mesmerized him. As the Strowats retired to their sleeping, and the Kujas rested in their own home. Little did they know that the Pirate Empress was definitely losing herself to one Mugiwara Monkey D. Luffy, and sleep was not an option. Sunrise. The very next day, as the sunlight finally grazed the sky, Luffy stood over the balcony of the royal bedroom. There he overlooked the sky, and took in the fresh air. He then felt warm hands wrap around his waist, as the women of his desire joined him in his deep thoughts. What's on your mind? She was still sleepy. As she hugged him, she grazed against his back. He then turned his head slightly, inhaling her scent. I like you, Hancock, I really do. I don't want this to be a one-time thing, I want this all the time. Me too, Luffy. He finally turned and looked her in her eyes, her beautiful, amazing gems staring right back at him. As you know, my adventures will take me to the open seas, and I want you to come with me. Join my crew, be by my side when I conquer the world. Luffy had never felt this way about anybody before, all he used to think about was meat and fighting. But traveling back in time caused him to mature much faster, and it also helps that he was smarter than ever. Before she could answer, an explosion occurred on the port entrance to Amazon Lily. She then looked him in the eyes once more before he nodded his head. He understood that she had to be the empress in her country at this time. Later, she kissed him in the mouth, her lips lingered with him for a moment before quickly changing to her empress attire. He then made his way to his own clothes, pulling out a small snail. He then proceeded to put on his clothes, as she, 2 new messages, said the messenger snail. This was an amazing technology that the fish people were hiding. Amazing, play. He didn't know what to say, but the snail responded, and began to play the messages. First message the voice then played, as Queen told him. Hi Mugiwara-san, surprise. You did not expect a message to be left for you. One of our many technological advances that I am excited to share with our human friends, as per your request we have located your people. Neko Robin is currently in Alabasta, but we have trouble reaching her, as she is being safeguarded by Sir Crocodile. But good news in terms of your skeleton friend. He was picked up by the Sun Pirates, and brought to Sabati, as per your request. He is currently at the care of Shaky. Anyway, if I don't pick up, you can leave a message for us. Then another voice played in the background. Wishing you well, Mugiwara. It was King Neptune's voice, to which Luffy smiled. Second message was Katakuri. Captain, we won. Then the message ends. Straight to the point, that was good. Then someone called, and it was none other than Mihik. Captain, an unknown stranger has entered the land. I feel that they have come with bad intentions. Where are they? How did they enter without permission from the Kuja? Asked Luffy over the messenger snail. The unknown person has entered through a burning slaver ship, no survivors on board, barging the gateway to Amazon Lily. The ship was covered in oil, and is currently burning the wooden gate. That was the explosion I heard. Luffy wondered who it could be. Maybe someone he needs to be concerned about. And then he knew exactly who it was. Definitely someone who he should be concerned about. Then the call disconnected, and nothing could be heard on the line. The call suddenly dropped, which confused Mihik. Hello. Nothing. Then Arlong grabbed the phone, and yelled at the snail. Captain. Though no answer on Luffy's end. In the sleeping quarter outside of the capital, the Straw Hats looked at one another in concern, then they all got up, and ran, disappearing into the distance. Katakuri had been the fastest, knowing exactly where Luffy was. After all, he had been in a battle with Hancock in the capital palace, where else would he be? Mihik was close behind Katakuri, with Arlong keeping pace with Broly, ensuring her safety in the foreign land. What had happened to Luffy, and why did he hang up the line so suddenly? A week prior to the attack on Amazon Lily, a man sat at the peak of the slaver ship. He surveyed the surroundings, trying to locate any sign of life. Though no luck. The lead which he had followed led to a dead end, and he was riding blind. The carcass which had covered the deck was thrown overboard, to feed the sea life. He was a lone man floating aimlessly. Who was he? Well, his name was Agent 1, do you copy? A voice echoed throughout the empty ship. That was him, his code name under the cipher full agency. Copy? Was his reply. Short, simple, concise. He took a bite out of an apple he found at one of the barrels that occupied the ship. Food shouldn't be a problem on his trip, since he had enough food for the 49 slavers he found on the ship. There's a let for your target 500 clicks somewhere in the northwest direction. Then your target became a ghost. Copy HQ, over and out. He then disconnected the call before finishing his apple. With the ship that he stole, it should take him a good 3 to 4 days depending on Grand Line weather. If he were to find his target, he would need a little luck. For the days he had estimated, all he could really do is to stay his course, and push forward no matter what the weather brought his way. He worked out when he could, and rested when he could. But the journey was still, but his spirit would not waver. He had a mission, and he never failed his mission. Never failed. His eyes closed, as the memory passed through him again. There he stood, over a body of 500 soldiers, with the last of the hostages in his hands. A pirate crew had taken them hostage in order to bargain for the kingdom which they wanted to conquer, claim for themselves. The memory faded from his eyes, replaced by the moment when he took the pirate captain's head. He was shot on his back, leaving him incapable of battling for some time. They were going to dispose of him, as his injuries were too dire, but he persevered, killing those who tried to kill him. It was then that he became the best. Nobody dared question him in the organization again. But why did he murder all those people? Well, then his eyes opened, removing him from his daze. A story for another time. His journey has taken him on the outskirts of what seems to be a remote island. His gut was telling him this was the place, but there was simply nothing. He needs to circle the island several times to find an entranceway. So that he did, but he couldn't find anything, not even a sign of life. So why did intel bring him in this direction? They did say that his target disappeared after the initial intel. Did he leave? Though yet again, good fortune smiled upon him, as a remote group of about 4 women, dressed in indigenous native attire, came out of the wooden forest, a few clicks ahead of him. They never looked in his direction, focused on something else. What was it? He didn't really care, all he knew was to wait for them to clear the area, disappearing in the distance, and he finally had a way in. He steered his ship to the direction which the indigenous came from, and slowly went through a tunnel of giant trees. Then he found a giant wooden gate. It was going to be a problem. Then he had an idea. The agent went below deck, gathering as much oil as he could find, and covering the entire ship. If it was a giant wooden gate, he should be able to burn it down. As he got close to the gate, he could hear a ring of panic from the indigenous hiding from the top of the gate. "What is that?" stated one of the guards. "Must be a lost ship. It will simply sink upon collision with the gate." Replying to another guard, the agent looked from his hiding location below the deck, where the slaves were held previously, and saw that only 2 women were guarding the gate. They were really confident about their security. They were going to get a rude awakening. The agent took out a match, and lit it against the wall. Then, as the ship collided with the gate, the agent ignited the entire ship, and with the ship covered in oil, a fire spread quickly. The impact generated a giant explosion, covering the bottom of the gate in flames. But the agent punched a hole on the bottom of the sea, and swam underneath the wreckage. He was finally in, and he just had to find his target. That should be easy enough. A target with a billion on his head should be located at the central area of the island. His importance shouldn't be ignored, and therefore he will be in the capital. So the agent dashed through the forest. His speed was nothing to blink about. At the tender age of 18, he mastered the art of Rakishiki early, and all he had to do was hone it. Within a few moments of blowing a hole through the gate, and traveling the massive remote island, he finally found the capital. And where will his target be? The tallest building, of course. He quickly scaled the side of the building, reaching the highest room. There he found a man speaking to someone over the line. He knew this was his target because of the aura he was letting out. He attempted to kill him early. A quick swipe to his jugular should make it quick, but his target was stronger than that. For the man caught his arm before even turning around. The agent couldn't believe what was happening. All of his targets were eliminated swiftly, in and out in a matter of seconds. This was not good at all. "Hello, Luchi," said the man. "How the hell?" Then, as quick as lightning, emptiness. The man had caught him before he could react, his fist colliding with his own face once, twice, thrice. Then the agent couldn't count anymore, as he was being barraged with punches, like a machine gun. Each strike was hitting him on his way down. Then nothing. His target was none other than Luffy, who was a bit on edge for getting interrupted from his moment with his woman. And beating him down was from pent-up frustration against him, especially for what he did in his previous lifetime. But something happened. Another vision passed through him, as his final punch nearly connected with one of his most hated enemies. "Fuck," he exclaimed, as he knew these things happened to gain a sense of how that person's past shapes their future. It was how he saw Queen Itohem's past which urged him to help save Fisher Tiger's life, how he saw the life which Hancock had to endure now peek into Lucci's life. Luffy found himself standing at a village on fire. A man, possibly in his 30s, was running. From what? He couldn't tell. In his arm was a child, no older than 8. His father stopped, holding the child up, and holding his shoulders, violently shaking him to his senses. "Listen here, boy, she is dead, your mother is dead, and it is because of my weakness." The child stopped crying, still not understanding the situation. "If you are not on top, then you are dead." And, as the words escaped his mouth, a bullet went through his head, blood spewing all over the child. No tears escaped the child's eyes, as all he could do was freeze in shock. And before him, an uncanny figure with a strange-looking mask. The figure's left hand held a gun, its barrel still hot from the bullet which escaped it. The masked figure pointed its gun at the child's head to no reaction. Then, as the masked figure was about to pull the trigger, the child disappeared in a blur, attempting to kill the figure which murdered his father in cold blood, but he was not able to reach him. It took another 2 masked figures to subdue the boy who was going berserk. The masked figure disappeared in the shadow, with the child's eyes never leaving the assailant for even a second. Then the memory transformed to another. This time the young boy had yet to grow, but a certain fire was in his eyes. He was on a training field, practicing the basics. It couldn't have been more than a couple months since the boy had lost his father. Then time seems to fast forward, as the boy continues to train, from sunrise to sunset. His resolve was absolute, his will was undying. Nobody could beat him wherever he went, the perfect tool of war. His goal was to kill the agent which killed his father. But to do so, he needed to get stronger, and he needed to be high enough in ranking to gain access to top secret information. Then the boy grew after some time, possibly in his early teenage years. He stood before 2 masked figures, a different mask from the people from the earlier memory, but they seemed to be the instructors. "Agent 93, in order to prove your worth, you must destroy Warring Kingdom. The pirates which have overthrown the sovereign power of that land have created an annoyance in which must be properly disposed of. Stupid numbers was his thought. He only needed to move up to Agent Zero in order to reach his end goal, in order to get what he needed from them. The second masked figure then placed its hands on the shoulder of the teenager. Upon completion, your place in the Cipher Full Agency will be significantly favorable for you. And conversely, upon failure, you will be terminated. Copy. He had no choice. In this world which he was forcefully brought into, was killed or be killed. He needed to get his revenge, but at what cost? Luffy finally understood the foundation which made the monster, driven by revenge and thirst for power. He was just a child when he witnessed. Then it was the fateful mission, the mission to assassinate the 500 kingdom soldiers who were held hostage, and to kill the pirate crew which took the kingdom into their own hands. Luffy watched as the assassin cleanly eliminated all of his targets, skillfully and masterfully. Though nothing could prepare him for the end, for, as he took the head of the pirate captain, his men shot him in the back, causing him to fade away. His mission was over, but he had failed, and failure was termination, and he was not going to die that day. He had a man he had to kill, and his life would not end there. In the carnage of which he left behind, 2 masked Cipher Pole agents were sent in to kill the wounded agent. But he was not ready to die, as he killed the men who were sent in to eliminate him. The last memory that Luffy saw was Lucci, recovering from his injuries with the masked Cipher agent. The agent gave him a document, marked Agent 1. And then nothing. The memory ended, and Luffy once again stood over the body of Rob Lucci, his body beaten to a slimness. The stone floor on his back collapsed on its own. Lucky for him, Luffy had been holding back, not wanting to destroy the building for Hancock. By seeing his life, Luffy understood the man's goal and motivation. But yet he could not overlook everything that he has done, at least not for some time. Mihawk had been a warrior, bringing up fights all over the world in order to become the strongest. Arlong had yet to perform the atrocities he brought upon Nami's island. Broly and Katakuri were strictly working for their mother, and, as far as he could tell, they were mostly responsible for their own areas, and didn't really bother with their mother's business. So for their case, ignorance is bliss. His thoughts were interrupted when his crew finally arrived, probably alarmed by the abrupt ending to their call. Everything okay? Katakuri was the first man to arrive, looking first at Luffy whose fist was still covered in the assailant's blood. Then Mihawk barged right in, as well, relaxing slightly at the sight of the captain being alright. He's alive, I did not kill him. His voice was low, almost, as if he had slight remorse for the assassin. Well, what now? Asked Mihawk, observing the beaten man on the ground. Bring him to the prison cell. Was Luffy's command, confusing Katakuri. Sure, Captain, but are we okay to do that? Katakuri asked. Lucci was currently stuck on the ground, etched into the foundation. Katakuri and Mihawk had their backs turned against the door while Luffy was facing the doorway. All Luffy could do was smile before a call came into Lucci's messenger snail. Agent 1, mission report. Luffy picked up the snail and placed it close to his mouth, speaking to whoever was on the other line. Whatever you wanted to do, you failed. He responded. Who the hell are you? Where is Agent 1? The man on the other line had an annoying voice. Doesn't matter, whoever you or your agent is done for, you have failed. Who the fuck cares? Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what happened to that stupid boy, all I care about is if Mugiwara has been eliminated. His words woke up the fallen warrior. His wounds were immense, but his body was numbed by his commander's words. I will never die. He then hung up the snail call before they could trace the call, but did he let the call go on for too long? If so, then Rob Lucci's former agency, the Cipher Full, will be sending a group after them. Luffy was deep in his thoughts, cueing the rest to leave their captain in his thoughts. Katakuri and Mihawk picked up Lucci from the ground, partly conscious from the beating that he received from Luffy. Arlong and Broly finally arrived, but it was too late. They ended up following Katakuri and Mihawk. Though a half-hour passed before his lover joined him in the room, he was still stuck in his thoughts, contemplating the situation. The perimeter has been secured, the flames have been contained at the gate. Hancock had arrived and snapped Luffy in his thoughts. It was then that Luffy came to a realization. Luffy, what happened? We have to move out quickly. Cipher Pole is on my tail for some reason, and we need to get out of here, in the open sea, where you're not in danger, where your people are safe. Luffy assumed that Hancock would choose to stay with her country, but to his surprise, she chose him. Luffy. She then kissed him on the lips. I'm going with you. Really, you will go with me? Luffy could not believe him, his heart fluttering at her answer to a question he had asked her earlier. But what about your kingdom? Your people? I will be succeeded by my sister, Sandersonia, for the role of Amazon Lily. I'm going with you, silly. After what we did, there's no one else I'd rather be with, but why do we have to leave? We can make our stand here in Amazon Lily, we would have the advantage. It was a valid question, but Luffy also had a more valid answer. That's a good point, but also it is not. In your land of Amazon Lily, we would have an advantage of them coming to us. But there is the problem of having to look after your people. I don't want to risk your people's life when there is another way. He then brought her outside on the balcony, pointing at the open sea that was over the horizon. In the open sea, we don't have to worry about anyone. It gives us a chance to let loose, for the Cipher Full Agency to see what the real Straw Hat Grand Armada is about. With that, Hancock smiled, finally understanding him. She knew her abilities and power. She was a royal Shichibukai despite being so young, but her lover was a $1 billion man. She couldn't help but shudder in excitement at seeing his power firsthand. Dungeon's Amazon Lily. His body would wake up every now and then. Each would be worse than the last. Never in his life had he ever lost to anyone. A master of the undefeated cold-hard assassin. And here he was, cuffed against a stone wall, with the man who defeated him without a sweat, standing in front of him. Lucci spat blood that built up in his throat, his eyes slightly open from being inflamed. Sifrapol is coming. Luffy had his left hand on his chin, surveying the prisoner. They do not care for you. If you die, it's not really a big deal to them. He knew that. He heard it before passing out again. What do you want to do? There's only one thing I need to do to kill that man. The one who killed your father. Luffy knew this. He saw his memory. Yeah. He replied angrily. Then why become their puppet? A tool at their disposal. If I reach a high enough rank in the organization, I'll get to learn his name. That makes sense. Revenge can really shape a person to do horrible things for the sake of retribution. Okay, Lucci. But what do you do now? Your organization has abandoned you. I know. I'll have to ask you if Lucci looked him directly in the eye. That if I die here in this foreign land, to kill them all. You won't die in this land, Lucci. You will be coming with me. I plan to meet the Sifrapol unit that is heading this way. In the open ocean, my crew will destroy them all. Will you accept? Luffy would not have done this if he didn't know what the agent had gone through. Everyone had a story, everyone had a purpose. Yes. To this, Luffy removed the agent's arms from bondage and caught him before falling on the floor. He collapsed from exhaustion, and blood flow was not good when hanging from a dungeon wall by the wrist. Good. The very next day, Lucci was immediately rushed to the infirmary ward with a day to recover from his wounds. The Stroats were debriefed of what the plan was, to which they all agreed would be a good plan. Sandersonia was given the throne of Amazon Lily, to which everyone joined in on the brief celebration. And finally it was time to go. Thank you for the ship, Hancock. The crew was given a spare ship that the Kuja woman had taken from a lost pirate crew. I hope it is good enough before we get to where you want to get a ship. It will. He gave her a kiss on the lips before she slapped him playfully on his chest. Now there's people here. For a pirate empress, she sure was shy when showing affection. They were currently on the deck of the ship, except for Lucci, who had been placed in one of the rooms below the deck. Arlong had his arms around Burley. Katakuri was paying attention to the meeting, and so was Mihik. Right. So everyone, once we meet them, we don't hold back. They are coming after us to kill us, to destroy anyone who gets in the way of their goal. Right, Captain? Replied Katakuri. I shall prove my worth. Let's make it a competition, exclaimed Arlong. I'll take your wager, Arlong. A month's cabin boy chores to the one with the least enemies slain. Mihik proclaimed. You can even combine yours and Burley's total to make it fair. Fine. Arlong replied, knowing Mihik would mop the floor on him, but with Burley, maybe they'll have a chance. Excellent. Me and Hancock will take care of the command center. I feel then, to the surprise of the crew. Lucci had walked out of bed and towards the deck of the ship, gripping onto the railing for support. They will probably bring 3 ships full of maybe 2 high-ranking Sifrapol agents, the commander, and about 200 recruits. And leave me, that rat will definitely be there. I will kill Spandine myself. He was Agent 1, his access was one step away from gaining absolute knowledge within the organization. He surveyed him for a moment, his body oozing with anger that Luffy couldn't deny his request. Alright, revenge was truly an unbelievable driving force. Luffy smiled at Lucci, maybe he'll get the answer he's been looking for. So their plan was now in motion. The ship which they boarded finally set its course to the open sea. Its trajectory was on a collision course with the Sifrapol attack unit that was heading to Amazon Lily to kill them. Some distance away from them, in correlation with Lucci's intel, the Sifrapol did bring 3 ships. They did have 200 capable fighters within the organization. And lastly, they did have commanding officer Spandam, and 2 additional high-ranking Sifrapol agents, Agent 2 and Agent 3. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.